Hello folks, if you're interested in armed self-defense, one of the first skills that you're going to have to develop is marksmanship. Being able to hit the target, hit the person who might be trying to harm you. That's what we're going to talk about next. Please join me. Welcome folks, Dick Fairburn here. In this armed self-defense series of videos that I'm putting together, we're going to talk about the first skill that we have to develop in order to protect ourselves, our homes, our families with a small arm, generally with a handgun, because that's what most of us are going to use. That's the portable thing that you can carry with you when you leave your home. We're going to talk about marksmanship. The sight alignment, the trigger control, how do you put those shots on target? And even more importantly, in my research of over 40 years, where does the marksmanship skill rate? Where does it fit in the needs that we have to win that gunfight? And what we have found is that the marksmanship skills you need are really pretty simple for most of the kind of situations you're going to face. Doesn't mean we should ignore it at all, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't develop the highest level of marksmanship you can. So that's what we're going to talk about. I talked about grip, stance, sight alignment, and here's what I've learned over the years. There are different schools of thought. The stance. When I learned over the years, the stance, the grip, the things like that have changed as pistol shooting has evolved. In 1981, I attended a class at the Gunsight Ranch with Jeff Cooper, the man who invented the modern technique of the pistol. There are a lot of trainers out there nowadays that like to denigrate Colonel Cooper, but he's where it all came from. Whether you agree with his techniques or whether you differ, saying that Cooper did not have the world's largest impact on pistol shooting is just defying reality. And he was a very opinionated man, but he was also open to other ideas. He would listen to you and then give you his thoughts. And his thoughts were not based on simply thinking about it. They were based on World War II and a lot of field use of pistols by people that he trained. At Gunsight, under the tutelage of Jeff Cooper, and the operations officer there at the time was Clint Smith, who's now the honcho at Thunder Ranch and has been for quite a while. I learned the Weaver stance. And when you see me shoot in some of the videos that I'm putting together, you're going to see that kind of bent arm Weaver stance. Why do I still use it? Because it works for me, and because I've done it for so long, it's ingrained into me, and it's kind of that old dog learning new tricks thing. I don't see anything wrong with it. In fact, I see an advantage to the Weaver stance. It is actually more like you use with a carbine than the more squared off isosceles stance. But the Cooper's fallen out of favor. When I went through the basic police academy, one of the instructors there saw me shooting, and on a break, he had to make sure I understood that the Weaver stance was stupid and would get me killed. And at the time, when I went through the police academy, I was still carrying a revolver. And he said, and besides that, the Weaver stance won't work with a revolver. It only works with semi-automatics. And all he did was show his ignorance, because the guy who invented the stance, Jack Weaver, was a deputy sheriff in Los Angeles County, California. And he carried a revolver, not a semi-auto. And even today, we see a lot of trainers who develop these rigid thought processes and rigid techniques that they will insist that you use. And they're not really based in science. They're not really based in valid research. Any stance can work for you if you do it well. Any grip can work. Now, I have adapted my grip over the years from what I learned at Gunsight with a 1911 that better suits all types of handguns that you may fire. And I'll point that out to you in a future video. But here's the difference. Here's the problem. The gunfights don't look anything like the shooting range. That perfect isosceles stance, that perfect thumbs forward grip that you may have on the training range or at an IDPA shoot or at a USPSA competition is probably going to completely fall apart in a gunfight. Gunfights happen at 3 yards in 3 seconds with 3 rounds. That's the average. And it's been the average for 50 years or more. So the perfect stance is not going to work. Chances are, in a real gunfight, you're not going to be standing still duking it out with each other anyway. These things are very fluid. Typically, your target will be moving. You may be moving. You may not even be upright on your feet when it comes time to shoot. So that's why I say learn your own stance. Learn your own grip. If it isn't exactly like the master instructor wants you to use, but it works for you, that's fine. Now, there are some techniques you may use that are not safe or that would hamper further things that we're going to develop for you in training, that they may conflict with the use of a carbine or something like that. But I have always trained people to find what works for them. And I don't argue with success. If they're putting the rounds on target in a timely fashion and they know how to run the gun, they're stable, then it works. So that's my philosophy here. You know, if you can shoot over your shoulder with a mirror and put nice, quick hits on the target, I think you're kind of funny looking, but I guess I'm not going to argue with you completely. That's an over-exaggeration, of course. Almost any grip and almost any stance can work if you use it enough to deeply program that into muscle memory, midbrain, the computer side of your brain, not the conscious thought process. If you do it enough to do it on automatic, it's going to work for you. And I will tell you that some of the techniques used by the really high-level competitors, I'm not going to name names. I've shot against several of them and normally get my butt handed to me because these guys are masters of the pistol. But I will tell you that some of the techniques they use can only work if you're burning through 50,000 rounds of practice ammo a year. You're probably not going to do that. The cops that I had to train were getting 200 to 300 rounds of training experience per year. So the techniques I developed were dirt simple. They're going to work without a lot of repetitions to remind you. Those high-level techniques they use, that goes along with lots of practice, lots of rounds being fired. And it gives them that slight edge that they need to win those pistol matches. You don't necessarily need those edges in a gunfight. Dry fire is a great way to learn marksmanship. Get your solid stance, get your solid grip. We're going to check it's empty. Make sure you check to see if it's empty. It's possible to get a very rude, loud noise when you don't expect it, when you get a little sloppy. And if you handle guns as long as I have, there's a chance you might get sloppy once in a while and plug a hole in the wall. But it was the wall, it wasn't anything important. So check it, double check it, triple check it, and then line up the sights. Slow, careful trigger pull. You make the shot without the sights moving. That's the secret to marksmanship. Okay? I'm not going to tell you how to line the sights up. It's pretty self-explanatory, or in the most simple of marksmanship schools, they're going to tell you how to line those sights up. And the sights are differing. They used to all be square sights. Now we're seeing some rounded front sights. We're seeing rounded bottoms in the rear sights. They can all work. Cycle that slide. Make sure that it's empty. Dry fire can work. If you're shooting a revolver, you have the advantage that you can do follow-up shots with a double-action revolver. Again, make sure it's empty. Good grip. Sight alignment. Smooth trigger pull. The goal is to make the shot without moving the sights very much on the target. This is slow, but we can fire a revolver pretty quickly, especially at close range with a large target. And you can do those follow-up shots. Dummy rounds. Here are a couple of examples. Some are metal cased, some are all plastic. They come for semi-autos. They come for revolvers. It's not a bad idea to load your weapon with dummy rounds when you're doing dry fire practice. Better than just an empty hole. Make sure you have those dummies in there, because that orange or that silver case is going to immediately mark it as safe to work with. Shooting a hole in the wall is bad. Shooting through the wall and hitting a family member on the other side will be the worst day of your life. What kind of targets do we use? There are hundreds, literally hundreds of different targets out there on the market. Here's the most simple target we use in law enforcement training. In fact, in Illinois, the scoring zone of our state mandated police training target is essentially an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Actually, I think theirs is an 8.5 by 14 legal size, a little bit bigger than you probably need. That represents that center mass of a human shape that you're going to need to shoot at. When you get better and you're going to practice headshots at a reasonable difference, a 3x5 index card will work. So whether it's a B-27 target or an IDPA target, a USPSA competition target, the humanoid shape is what you should be dealing with, and the scoring zones should be pretty generous. Okay, we're not able to dot the I's and put little bug hole groups in a gunfight, so that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for center mass hits as quickly as you can place them on target. And for most of your practice, you don't need to spend a lot of money. Simple pieces of paper or index cards will get you by. We tell you you're going to shoot center mass. Marksmanship is generally aimed at the center of the mass of your humanoid target. Why do we do that? Well, a couple reasons. If we put you in the middle and you miss by a little, and it's still going to be pretty much in there where we need. We allow for some fudge factor. Also, that's where the most vital organs are: the spine, the heart, the lungs. We want to do as much damage as we can. Interesting little anecdote. A number of years ago, Winchester Ammunition brought out, this would be about 1990 or 91, they brought an ill-fated round out called the Black Talon. It was a jacketed hollow point. The jacket was kind of made in reverse, so that when the hollow point opened up and those petals came out, what came out with them were very sharp claws, like at the end of each expanded petal. And when you fired these things into gelatin blocks, you could literally see those things like 6 knives spinning through, causing the wound. And if you know from bow hunting, they use razor head, broadhead hunting arrows, because that razor cut causes bleeding in there at a much higher rate than if a blood vessel is just torn by a blunt object punching through. Cutting is the fastest way to bleed something out. And in my opinion, that was the most effective, the most devastating round that ever hit the market. Part of the problem was they used a Winchester proprietary product called Luballoy, which is a black coating film. I don't know why they felt the need to do that, but the combination of black and the idea that most of the targets, unfortunately, that police officers shoot at, many of the people that police officers shoot at are blacks, got it some really bad press. Some silly doctors were saying that, oh my God, these things are terrible. They're gonna puncture our gloves when we're doing surgery. They're gonna harm the doctors. Don't stick your finger down in the hole, doc. You got X-rays to tell you what's in there, but that's another matter. The point is, those bullets were pulled from the market very quickly. And in fact, those that are still out there go for pretty high prices on Gunbroker and auction sites like that. I had some of those and was involved in testing in both ballistic gelatin blocks and jugs full of water at the time. And I saw some of the pre-production bullets from these Black Talons, and I was just amazed. To me, it looked like a flying Home-Light chainsaw coming at you. And I was at one of the major ammunition manufacturers doing some consulting work, and I knew that he hadn't seen these yet. And I said, "What do you think of this? This is a new Winchester product." And this guy made ammo for a living, a big game hunter. He knows a lot of his ammo is going to be used against people. That's why he builds it. And that's why he sells it to cops and civilians. And he looked at this with this horrible look on his face, and he said, "Oh my God, this is a killer bullet." And I said, well, Steve, we don't usually shoot people we like. The whole point of shooting people is to do as much damage as possibly can, as rapidly as we can, and terminate the fight. Well, he admitted that, saying it was a killer bullet might have been a misnomer, because essentially they're all killer bullets. But the effectiveness of that black talon bullet was pulled off the market because of media hype. Our goal is to do as much damage as we possibly can. Now, someday, I think we're going to have a Star Trek phaser. We can set it on stun, we can set it to vaporize, and when they're available, I'm going to sell everything else I've got and I'm going to buy one, because that's going to be the way of the future. But I think it's going to be a few years before we get there. So that's why we shoot at center mass, to do as much damage as possible. I mentioned marksmanship skills to deliver headshots. Why do we shoot at a person's head? That is truly a killer shot, is it not? A bullet in the brain is almost always going to be fatal. It is not always fatal, but it typically is. The reason we train cops, and you should also develop the skills to make headshots under some circumstances, is multifold. Sometimes that may be the only target you have. Their body is blocked by some kind of intervening cover. More importantly, if you absolutely must make an instant stop, make them stop what they're doing this very moment. The only way you can do that is to disrupt the brain or the upper spine, the central nervous system. That will put somebody on the ground immediately and stop the fight. It may or may not kill them. Killing is not our goal. Stopping is our goal. If we have to kill in the process of getting that done, then that's what we have to do. So that's why we might need to train headshots. Headshots with pistols are going to have to be pretty close range affairs. The human head is one of the most active and moving parts of our body, especially in a fight. So hitting that moving target means you're going to have to do it pretty close. A 7-yard headshot under street conditions is pretty impressive. If things are static, you might be able to do it further away. We train headshots because that is the only instant off switch that's available to us when we're throwing bullets downrange. We generally train officers. We're going to train you to fire in multiple shots. 2 shots, 3 shots. Why do we do that? Well, first of all, if we're firing 2, then maybe we got a better chance at hitting with 1. On the range, you're probably going to put 100% of your targets on a man-sized target. But on the street, it's not going to be that good. I mentioned in an earlier video that with the Illinois State Police, at one point, their hit rate was only 11%. 89% of the bullets they were firing at bad guys didn't hit the bad guy. Now they're up to about 62%, and 62% is the highest recorded number I've seen documented. 50% is pretty good. If you hit with half of your rounds in a gunfight, I'm impressed. That's why we fire 2. That's why we might want to fire 3 to make sure we're going to get that 1. If we happen to get 2 or 3 hits, then we've done that much more damage. We've started the target losing blood that much more quickly. So by firing 2 or 3, we got a better chance of hitting with at least 1 with a 50% hit rate, which is 50% is going to impress me. If we happen to hit with 2 or even 3, we've done even more damage. And by doing that damage, we've got blood loss multiplied. And for the most part, unless you hit the central nervous system, the brain or upper spine, the only way you're going to stop a gunfight is by lowering their blood pressure to the point that their body can't function anymore. You got to bleed them out. So the more holes, the bigger holes, the deeper holes you can produce, the more quickly you're going to bleed these people out and end the fight. Once your basic marksmanship skills are developing, you need to start working in low light conditions. Most shootings are going to occur in less than full daylight. Not total darkness, not full sun, somewhere in between. That can be because of the time of day. It can be because you're inside of a building. But you need to be prepared for those low light circumstances. I'm a huge believer in night sights. Those night sights make all the difference. There are some now by TrueGlow and other companies that have a large fiber optic insert with that radioactive insert in the middle of it. And I mean, these things are like glowing tennis balls out there in front of your eyes. You're going to see those sights under terrible light conditions. It's essential that you have those. An alternative, or possibly even an add-on to night sights, and this pistol has the Heine straight 8 night sights, but it also has a laser grip on it. So I have the addition that when I grip this pistol, I'm throwing a red dot out there. Green dots are even better. Red dots are visible in low light. Green dots are visible even under most daylight conditions. The eye is much more sensitive to a green laser than to a red. So putting the equipment on your pistol to be prepared for those low light situations is important. It's more difficult on revolvers, but newer models of revolvers can be fitted with at least an insert in the front sight, and that's an advantage. You may need to add light to the situation. Some people like weapon mounted lights. This is a stream light. I have always kind of preferred a handheld light. Here's a small light that I carry in my pocket. Works great for addition of light into the situation. So when you are in really deep dark conditions, you need to bring your own light with you. There are several techniques that we will show you on how to fire with both handheld and weapon mounted lights. That all fits into the marksmanship category that we're talking about. One thing that I want to tell you from over 40 years of training people that I have learned is the technique of marksmanship training it wears you out. Especially if you go to a 3 or 4 day school, just feeding magazines will wear your thumbs out to the point that they're so sore you can hardly function. As much as possible, do your training in short segments. Couple hours, couple hundred rounds at the maximum, and you don't get fatigued. Just like with any kind of workout program, it doesn't matter if you do 100 repetitions of punching weight. It matters whether you do 25 correct repetitions. When you get tired, the repetitions get less than perfect. So as much as possible, break this down into small segments. And one place where I learned this, at the Illinois State Police Academy, we trained both state troopers and local officers that we called recruits as opposed to cadets. The state recruit firearms training program is 40 hours long, and we gave it as a 40-hour block. Start on Monday, you're done on Friday with your late afternoon qualification. Those kids were pretty worn out. At the end of each day, you'd see their performance drop down. And that's another thing to learn. In building your marksmanship skills, it's not a straight incline. You don't start here and just continually climb with better skills. There are ups and downs. You will get to here tomorrow, and then suddenly your skill level will bottom out. You can't figure out why. You're going to have to work on that to get it back up. That's a normal process. So expect that up and down rather than a straight flow. One of the other major police academies in the state broke up their 40 hours of training for local officers into small segments, no more than 4 hours long. And the amount of remediation training you had to get, when we got to the end and someone didn't qualify, then next week we're going to come back for a few hours, we're going to rebuild your skills, we're going to hone you a little bit, and we give you a couple, 3 chances to get qualified. Their initial qualification level rate was considerably higher than ours. And I really think a lot of that was biting that apple in small bites rather than a full 40-hour session that would wear them out. It helped you develop skills more rapidly and possibly even get to a little bit higher level as you went along. You also need to draw your pistol from a holster, a practical holster, the kind of holster you're going to carry for concealed carry. Okay, do you carry appendix at 1:30 o'clock on the 12 o'clock circle? It's at about 1:30. You carry right behind the hip at 4. You carry in a cross-draw shoulder holster. Don't see those that much anymore, but if you're wearing a coat, it's a very practical and very comfortable way to carry a pistol. And you may carry the pistol in different locations depending on how you dress. Everybody gets lazy, including me. My everyday carry pistol, for the most part, is a Kimber Micro 9 little mini 1911 style pistol. It fits in the front pocket of a pair of jeans or cargo pants perfectly. You don't even know it's there. And I have it with me almost every hour that I'm dressed. So that way I have it with me. Whereas if I was carrying this 1911, even though it's a lightweight commander, that's more of a hip holster kind of carry. So practice from the kind of holsters you're going to use. If you're going to use multiple pistols, especially, and multiple carry locations, you got to build that in. Here's the problem I see for most folks when they're doing marksmanship training and they're using their holsters. If you train at a commercial indoor range in the United States, chances are they're never going to let you draw a pistol. You lay your pistol and your ammunition on the tray in front of you, but you pick it up, load it, fire it, and put it back down. That's not practical shooting. That is just pure marksmanship, putting rounds on target and seeing how good a group you can develop. And that's important. We need to do that. But that's this much of what you need to know. We need to expand that out with practical training. That means you've got to get off those public ranges. Generally, you've got to get out to outdoor ranges. So you've got to join a club if you're in an area that has them. Major metropolitan areas are much more difficult to find locations where you can do the practical training. You may have to go to Gunsight, Thunder Ranch. There are a number of other training facilities around the country. There are a number of trainers who will come to you and put on weekend seminars in outdoor ranges like that. And you may have to pay to do that. And it's going to be money well spent. What do we have as marksmanship standards? And these are kind of the program I developed for training new police officers. And when I started out in the 70s, most cops were kind of gun-oriented people. They probably already had their own weapons. They'd already been shooting for a fair amount of time. A lot of the young police trainees we get nowadays, it's very possible the first time they've ever touched a gun in their life is the first day of firearms training at the academy. So they have no skills. And in some way that's an advantage, because if they will listen to you, they will learn, as opposed to some guy who's been doing it for a few years and thinks he knows everything. Our stage one, this is where we thought stage one needed to be. 100% hits on a human-sized target. 50% of those in that center mass region. Out to 7 yards. That's our magic distance for gunfights. And we found that within 2 to 4 hours of training and 100 rounds, maybe 200 rounds maximum, almost anybody with decent physical skills can reach that level of training. That's part of a day. For you, that's going to be a day at the range. If you learn how the weapon works, you master the trigger pull, you understand how to operate it, you get a decent grip and stance, you should be able to put all of them on that man-sized target at 7 yards pretty quickly. That's the basic floor that we build from. Stage two, we're looking at 100% hits on the target, 80 or more in center mass, and now we're moving it out to 10 yards. Now we're getting out of that typical gunfight range and we're starting to build skills at a little bit longer range. We're going to draw and fire singles here to draw and fire a round within about 1.5 seconds. So if you get a timer, borrow a timer. It's not going to be that to start with, but that's our goal. Eventually you're going to maybe go below 1.5 seconds, and that's a usable skill to develop. Stage three, 100% hits on the target, 80%, greater than 80% in center mass, out to 15 yards. And at stage three, we're going to expect you to be able to deliver headshots on demand to 7 yards. So now we're starting to pull that marksmanship down into a smaller target. We've got to put it in that triangle between the eyes and the nose and hit that instant off switch for the kind of situations that require that. And we're finding that within 300 to 500 rounds and a few days of good training, you should be able to get there. If you have a good coach, a good instructor, that's going to be just that much easier. It's very difficult to get there on your own. So if you're going to the range, you're strictly doing the training on your own, you don't have that objective viewpoint looking in and say, do you realize that you're catching your trigger? You're going through half a trigger pull, stopping and then starting again. Or the little inconsistent things that you might do. So what we're looking for here is performance out to 15 yards or better. We're going to start engaging multiple targets. We're going to start making headshots to 7 yards. And we're going to expect a total mastery of your weapon. Loading, unloading, which really blends into the next topic we're going to talk about, which is mechanics. So, you need to take your marksmanship skills to the highest level you can possibly reach. Not because you're going to need that level of marksmanship in a gunfight, but because your skills, whatever skills you have, are likely to degrade in a gunfight from what you've been doing on the firing range. A retired U.S. Navy SEAL by the name of Herschel Davis has a great quote. He says, "You will not rise to the occasion. You will descend to the level of your training." So be prepared with higher skills, understand that they will degrade under the stress of a gunfight, and be ready to deliver whatever you need to do to protect yourself and your family. Put a plug in. All of this course, all of this training is covered in the book, Building a Better Gunfighter. It's available on dickfairburn.com or on eBay. If you've watched to the end of this, I thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you could, would you hit the subscription button? Ring the little bell, give me a thumbs up. The next topic we're going to go to, marksmanship was the first of the 3 M's in our circle of training. Mechanics are next. So join me. Mechanics will be available for you.
Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.